Hello and welcome to my last vlog, this time taking on the subject of the coaching process. When we talk about the coaching process, I think we need to have some sort of foundation that we can refer back to every time we need to make a decision in our role as coaches. For me, this foundation is my coaching philosophy. As shown in the video, my coaching philosophy in my current role is to create fun and engaging large group sessions that enhances movement skills and motivate athletes to prioritize their physical development. I have highlighted the key words of this philosophy in red and will return to each of those words throughout the remainder of this vlog. When the coaching philosophy is in place, we can start using it to drive the coaching process. I have chosen to show 3 different approaches I use to try and achieve different parts of the coaching philosophy. I will show how I plan session, how I try to enhance skill acquisition, and the different approaches I use to increase motivation. When I plan a session, I use the didactical relations model to make sure that I look at all the constraints on the program and subsequently create a session that achieves my coaching philosophy in spite of those constraints. The model requires that you look at the learning conditions of the students, the setting you are in, the learning goals of the session, the content of the session, the learning process that are taking place, and lastly, how you're going to assess whether the goal has been achieved or not. An example of how this model is used in the planning process can be seen in this video. Here, I have used my knowledge of the setting to arrange everybody in a line where I can see every athlete simultaneously. Furthermore, I have used some time before the session started to make sure that all the equipment was ready for the athletes. This allows for a much smoother flow of the session where unnecessary waiting time is limited. Opposite the first example, this video shows how difficult it can be to factor in the settings. It is also a critique of my own planning. As you will see shortly, the constraints of the setting result in some athletes standing around waiting for their turn. Ideally, I had anticipated that and planned for some sort of manipulation of the exercise. So, using the settings of the session, this was a short example of how the didactical relations model can be used to plan sessions. However, the model is a framework that is interwoven throughout the coaching process. Parts such as the learning conditions of the athletes and the learning goals are shaping the coaching philosophy, and parts such as the settings and the content are what achieves the coaching philosophy. In other words, when you plan sessions using a combination of the didactical relations model and the coaching philosophy, you increase the chances of you adopting the most appropriate coaching philosophy for the groups you are coaching, and you make sure that you have a clear plan for how you will let the philosophy shape the session. The next objective, identified in the introduction of this video, is the enhancement of movement skill acquisition. I will show 2 exercises that are created using a combination of the constraint-led approach and discovery learning. These approaches are highly compatible since they both resolve around implicit learning and nonlinear pedagogy. The athletes are provided with a task and has to figure out how best to solve this task. In this first case, the attacker has to get to the line while being as far away from the defender as possible, and the defender has to mimic the attacker's movement while staying as close to him/her as possible. The next exercise is about reacting to an opponent's turn of the hip and catching him or her before the line. After the first repetition, different constraints are added to the exercises to force the athletes to explore new movement strategies. This fosters creativity and exploration of the body's movement capacities, and it fits well together with the overall theme of trying to teach essential movement skills, while the athletes are having fun with competing and challenging each other. After seeing the footage of myself, I would like to be more specific and helpful in my corrections in the future. I encourage a lot by clapping my hands and yelling stuff like, "Come on, great, excellent," and then proceeds to give overall corrections to the whole groups afterwards, as shown in the video. This could be changed by taking advantage of the small walk back to the beginning of the exercise to deliver some personalized feedback, which I failed to do in this particular clip. Another solution could be to give them the opportunity to give peer feedback to each other after the completion of the exercises. Get them to reflect on their performance instead of just going through the motion. This could furthermore be something they could be doing while they wait for their next turn because of the constraints of the environment, which I talked about earlier. Questions like, what was I satisfied with during the repetition? Or what can I do 1% better? In the partner exercises, we could also ask them what their partner would say they did good or bad, and afterwards hear what their partner actually thinks. This could theoretically increase the athlete's reflections on the movement strategies they are using and subsequently aid in enhancing skill acquisition. I see myself making some of the same mistakes in terms of my instructions to the athletes. I talk far too much and too long if I want to categorize the learning environment as driven by implicit learning. The content and thought process behind the session are clearly facilitating implicit learning, but going forward I will have to remind myself not to instruct on every single detail of the exercises. The last part I have chosen to focus on is about increasing motivation. This is done using concepts from self-determination theory and specifically resolves around orchestrating environments that increases autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Looking at autonomy, I always try to design activities where the athletes are working together with a partner. They get to choose their partner themselves, and as a consequence of the implicit learning framework, they are more often than not choosing which strategy they are going to use to complete the movement task. I then use competition to increase competence, as they are being given a task which has an immediately acknowledgeable result. They either win or lose, and they can use this information to reflect on how to do better next time, thus aiding to increase their competence. Furthermore, as mentioned during the enhancing movement skill part of this video, competition drives intent and fun, since these athletes are competitive by nature. Increasing the feeling of competence also goes back to my intention of improving motor skill acquisition by implicit learning. If the athletes feel I can make them better at something related to their sport, their feeling of competence grows. Relatedness feeds into coaching behavior, where we start to cross the line from science and into art. How do we create training environments where our athletes feel related to both us and each other? My take on this has been threefold. I make sure that I always stay moving and adopt different positions. I want to make sure that I am seeing different perspectives and that the athletes know that I am watchful and engaged in the session. I also provide encouragement and feedback to the athletes. As mentioned earlier, I have a tendency to encourage a lot and maybe not be as specific as would be optimal. Lastly, I try to make sure that the athletes are laughing and that they are having a good time. All three strategies is observable in this clip. I start by providing feedback and instruction from the edge of the group. When observing that some of them are paying less attention, I move towards the center of the group and continue the instructions. I then try to make them laugh, which is at least working on the guy in the red shirt, before switching position one more time. In this clip, I start with a demonstration before telling a joke to the girl I subsequently pat on the back. I then provide a minor correction to the exercise before continuing the instructions and then switching position one more time before the end. I try to speak in analogies and be very colorful in my language to try and enhance both retention and attention. I have now provided examples of the strategies I use to make sure that my coaching philosophy drives my own coaching process. To sum up, I think that the coaching philosophy should work as the overall framework for the coaching process. The didactical relations model can subsequently be used to plan individual sessions and even work as an evaluation tool to assess whether or not the coaching philosophy fits the learning condition of the athletes. Afterwards, different approaches from the motor learning literature can be adopted to make sure that the learning goals are achieved and strategies for enhancing motivation can be initiated. It is important to note that I have chosen these strategies as a consequence of both the learning conditions and the learning goals of this particular group of athletes. Other groups can have vastly different conditions, and that's precisely why an analysis of this is an important part of the coaching process. Lastly, as illustrated on the picture, the coaching process is an ongoing evaluation cycle. When specific initiatives such as motivational strategies are planned, they are subsequently evaluated in light of the coaching philosophy they are reflecting. Afterwards, new initiatives can be planned and the cycle starts over. Based on an evaluation of the footage of myself and the process of creating this video, I have selected 3 different parts of my coaching that I would like to improve upon in the future. These include improving my feedback, talking less to facilitate implicit learning, and paying even more attention to the setting. As always, thank you very much for watching this vlog.